All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to ACE Your Academic Interview, 8 Practical Tips for Success. I'm Amber Willenborg. I am an associate professor and the instruction coordinator at the University of Louisville Libraries in Louisville, Kentucky, so not too far away from some of you. Others of you who are not on campus may be far away. And I'm going to let my co-presenter introduce himself as well.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rob Detmering. I am a professor and the head of the Research Assistance and Instruction Department, also at the University of Louisville.
Yeah, and Rob and I both have a lot of experience with the academic interview process. As the head of our department, Rob has actually written several faculty librarian job ads, and we have both served on and chaired several search committees for both library faculty and staff positions in our library. So all of our tips today come out of our experience watching both successful and unsuccessful candidates go through the academic librarian interview process and learning what makes a candidate stand out from the rest. So we are going to move through our 8 tips for academic interview success, and then we'll have hopefully plenty of time for some questions from you all about academic interviews and anything we didn't address. And if you have any questions throughout, there's not a ton of us here, so I think we can manage it if you want to put something in the chat or just even raise your hand, we can try to pause and address that. So before we jump into those 8 tips, we are actually going to do a short mock interview and have you all critique it to get us thinking about what makes an interview good or bad. So Rob is going to be playing the interviewer. I'm going to be playing the interviewee. So just pay attention. Let us know in the chat what you think went well in this interview, what you think could have been improved. And there are going to be 4 questions in this mock interview, so it's going to be very short, but we will pause briefly between each question and response so that you have a minute to digest, so that you can type any thoughts in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. So we're going to get started. Scene and scene, is that what they say?
Okay. Hello, Amber. We're really glad to have the opportunity to interview you today for our open reference and instruction librarian position here at the University of Louisville. And as you know, this is a position that's going to focus primarily on reference services, instruction, and outreach responsibilities in the humanities. My name is Rob Detmering. I'm the head of the department, and several of my colleagues are going to be joining us for the interview today, as you know from the information that we sent you ahead of the interview. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started with the first question.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so our first question is, why are you interested in this position?
Yeah, okay. So I'm graduating in May with my MLS, and I'm really hoping for a job at an academic library. Ever since I was a kid, I've just loved books and I've loved reading. So I decided that librarianship would be a great career path for me. And also, I really just want to stay in Louisville because my family is here. So really, location is my primary concern.
Okay, so I'm pausing just a moment. If people would like to type anything in the chat about that response. Okay, Amber, our next question is, can you talk about your teaching experience?
I haven't really done any teaching yet, but I'm really excited to get started.
Okay, well, have you done anything where you provided instruction to someone or maybe presented information to teach someone something?
I have done some presentations to my classmates in college, like presenting on a topic to the class, but I don't really think that counts as teaching. I've spent mostly my time working with patrons on the reference desk, so I don't really have teaching experience, but I do have a ton of reference experience with patrons.
Okay, I'm just pausing for a moment while my colleagues write notes about your responses. Okay, so our next question, Amber, is how do you approach a reference interaction with a library patron?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I usually ask them, why are you here at the library? And then can you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, so it's how do you approach a reference interaction with a library patron?
Okay, so I guess I would normally, ask them what their question is, um, like where they've already looked for information. Then I'll work with them to maybe look for some information on Google or in the library, depending on what they need. So, oh, sometimes I'll check and see if it's for a class. So yeah, that's how normally I would approach it.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just pause for a moment. Okay, so our last question for you today, Amber, is what questions do you have for us?
I don't have any questions. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Amber. So we'll pause just for a moment to give people time to, if they want to add anything to the chat, and then we'll talk about that for a moment before getting into the tips.
Yeah, so far so good. You all are killing it in the chat. Everyone got that last one. Yes, always ask questions, and we'll definitely get into that today. The rest of these, there are a lot of tips that go along with some of the things we did, but people are definitely hitting on some of the things that we were trying to point out. In that first question, more specifics about that particular job, not just I want an academic librarian position. For that second question, downplaying your experience instead of talking yourself up. And then for that third question, really not being prepared to talk about a basic question that you're going to get a question about for a reference position, right? You're going to have to talk about your reference experience. So like I said, all of these are going to come back when we're talking about our tips, and we'll reference some of the things that happen in this interview as we go. But thanks so much for your participation in that. So we're going to go ahead and jump in now to tip number one. And tip one is to connect your cover letter to the job ad. So this is technically a tip for before your interview, but the best way to actually get an interview is with a great cover letter. So we have seen, Rob and I, in our time, tons of generic cover letters that just talk about a person's general experience and interests, but then don't take that step to apply those experiences and interests to the job at hand. And those cover letters never stand out to a search committee. Those are never rising to the top of a pile. So what we want to see is a cover letter that connects your specific experience and interests to that specific job that you're applying for. So this may seem like a lot, but you should write a new or at least a heavily revised cover letter for every job you apply for, and not just have a generic cover letter that you're submitting over and over again. It is really obvious to a search committee when your cover letter is one of those generic ones that you send out to every job you're applying for. And again, that doesn't make you stand out as the ideal candidate. When you're writing your cover letter, what we recommend is sitting down with the job ad and with the list of job duties and making sure that your cover letter hits on all the points covered in the job ad to the best of your ability. You can see in our example here up on the slide that the duties in this job ad included teaching information literacy sessions and collaborating and communicating with a team. And so in their cover letter, this person talks specifically about her experiences with those job duties. So they say, as a graduate student, I taught information literacy sessions to undergraduate students in a variety of subject areas, and often team taught instruction sessions with other GAs. This involved collaborating on lesson plans and so on and so forth. So really taking your specific experiences and touching on key parts of the job ad. Tip number two is to be confident. So you might be thinking, what if I don't have experience with something in the job ad? There's this list of qualifications or, preferred or required. And what if it's something that you just don't have any experience with and you're asked about it in the interview? So be confident. And this is something we saw in our mock interview. It's okay to be honest and say that you don't have experience with something. So saying, hey, I've never formally taught is not a bad thing. But you want to make sure that you can describe how the skills and experiences that you do have apply to the situation. So instead of just saying, I haven't done that, you can say, you know, I haven't done that specific thing, but here's what I have done that's going to help me be successful in this particular role. So again, we saw this in our mock interview when Rob asked me about my experience teaching, and I said, I don't have any experience. And then I just kind of, you know, mentioned a few things, but I second guessed myself and I said, but those don't really count as teaching. So you can see in our example here on the screen that this person doesn't have formal classroom experience, and they were asked, tell us about your teaching experience. But in their answer, they apply their experience working with patrons at the reference desk to teaching. And this would have been a great response for the question that Rob asked me, instead of me just saying, you know, I don't have any applicable experience, to apply my experience at the reference desk. So this person said, I don't have any formal classroom teaching experience, but I've worked one-on-one with students at a reference desk to teach them how to search databases. An example of a time I taught a student to use library resources for research is blah, 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 blah. So just saying, like, I've taught people at the reference desk, even though it's not a formal teaching experience. You want to show the search committee that you can handle your inexperience, especially if you're someone fresh on the job market, fresh out of college, that you can be confident in gaining the skills that you need to be successful in the job. So when you're preparing for your interview, think about anything in the job description or listed in the responsibilities that you don't necessarily have direct experience with, and think about how you can apply some of the things you have done to those responsibilities. So just get creative and show the committee what you're bringing to this role. Tip number 3 is to do your research. You should never go into a job interview not knowing all you can about the institution, the library, the department you're applying to. So go on the library website. Go on the department's website, read about the mission, the values, the current initiatives, anything you can find about that library and department, and then apply that research to your responses to questions, and probably most importantly, to your presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit more about presentations in a little bit, but academic interviews in particular will often ask you to do a presentation portion of the interview day, and you're really going to stand out if you do your research for that presentation. So knowing all you can about the library, and if it's applicable, other units on campus that you'll work with in that role are going to make you look like you really know your stuff and that you're prepared for this particular job. Not just I'm prepared to be a librarian, but I'm prepared to be this librarian at this university in this department. So in our example here, those pictures at the bottom of the slide, we recently hired a new engineering librarian, and her presentation was absolutely fantastic and really showed how she did her research. So you can see that she referred to the library's strategic plan, our library's strategic plan. She had images and information from the engineering school's website here at U of L. And she even had some information about the research of current engineering faculty in her presentation. She also looked up the program objectives and outcomes for an engineering summer research instruction opportunity here at U of L that she talked about working with in her presentation. So all of this really showed that she understood our institution and made her stand out as someone who is very confident and competent and ready to jump right in to take on the role of engineering librarian here at U of L. Again, not just saying I'm ready to be an engineering librarian, but to say I understand the context of your university, the needs of your faculty and students, and I'm ready to jump into this role. And then tip number 4 is to create an elevator pitch for yourself. You know for a fact that the first question you're going to be asked in an interview is, why are you interested in this position? That's going to be the first question. And you're going to be asked that multiple times throughout the day, because an academic interview usually involves interviews with several different groups or people, and they're all going to ask you that question. So you should have a response to that question practiced and ready to go. And that response should tie your experience and your interests, just like your cover letter, to the job at hand and sell you as the perfect person for the position. So it's okay to talk a little bit about location or more other superficial reasons why it's a good fit, but don't lead with that. You'll notice in my in my mock interview response, I answered this question really poorly, and a lot of you pointed this out in the chat. I gave a really generic response about like, I want to be an academic librarian and I love books and reading. I'm going to say it, never tell the search committee you love books and reading. We all love books and reading. You don't need to say it. And then I emphasized location above all else. I said, you know, my number one thing is I want to be in Louisville. So the problem with that response is that it's in no way tied to this specific job. Like, why do I want this job rather than any academic library job? Why am I the perfect person for this position? So in our example here, this person talks about their skills and experiences with online learning, along with their professional and personal interest in online learning and technology. So this is an online learning position. And this person says, the role of online learning librarian is a perfect fit for my skills and experiences. In graduate school, I took a class on multimedia tools and I got hands-on experience with, you know, A, B, and C. I've always loved learning new technology, and in my assistantship, I worked on several projects involving creating online learning objects like yada, yada, yada. So offer concrete examples, but keep your elevator pitch succinct. You don't want to talk for 5 minutes about every experience you've ever had. Those questions will come up as the interview progresses. You don't need to tell the search committee everything about you right now, but you want to have that succinct, that brief elevator pitch about your skills and experiences that you're just going to use when you get that question. You're like, here it is, here's who I am, here's why I'm perfect for that job. And again, just to mention, location is okay to talk about. You just don't want to lead with it and you don't want to overemphasize it. But in general, a search committee, if you say I have ties to this city, they're going to view that positively.
Okay. I was waiting for you to formally turn it over to me, so sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to turn it over to Rob for the next 4 tips.
Thank you, Amber. So tip 5, one of the most important ways to stand out when answering interview questions, and we've already talked a little bit about this, is to provide specific examples. So speaking in vague or overly general terms can make it difficult for the search committee to really understand your actual level of experience and how you're going to conduct yourself on the job. So you want to give the committee examples of who you are and what you've done that they can positively associate with you as a candidate for the position. You can prepare for this by listing out examples ahead of the interview, such as individual and team projects that you've worked on and what you contributed to them, as well as specific experiences that you've had on the job or in school that illustrate your skill set. For instance, for a question about teamwork, as we've illustrated there on the screen, you could discuss a collection project that you worked on with other graduate assistants, or you could talk about team teaching classes, or in trying to maybe focus on a particular class and what your contributions were and how it turned out. So being very concrete with those examples. Or if you're asked about your approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, you'd want to talk about specific ways that you've contributed in those areas, not just simply say, well, I support DEI. That doesn't give a committee much to really understand your level of commitment or interest in that area. And then the last example there, we have a slide about, the last example there about reference services. So being able to say more than just, I have reference experience, but to actually elaborate on the types of services that you've provided, such as in-person service or email or chat, and then giving examples of how you've actually worked with library users, which is something that in the mock interview, Amber didn't actually give real examples of how she actually conducted work with patrons at a reference desk. Our next tip is to practice the basics, by which we mean preparing responses for standard questions that you're likely to get during the interview, like the question that Amber was talking about, why are you interested in this position? You can't predict every single thing ahead of time, but you can anticipate that you will be asked questions about the specific responsibilities for the position that are listed on the job ad, as we've been saying. You don't want to seem surprised or confused when you're asked something that is specifically listed on the ad. That can be off-putting to the search committee, like, why didn't you prepare for that? When I asked Amber about how she would approach a reference interaction, she should have been prepared with a clear answer, because reference is such a basic fundamental part of a job that's called reference and instruction librarian. You know you're going to be asked about that in the interview, so you should have a ready answer with specific examples, and you should be able to articulate really your philosophy or your perspective or your point of view in that area. What do you bring to reference work, or what would you bring to reference work specifically? So a better answer would have been for Amber to say, here are the specific questions that I tend to ask patrons when they come to the reference desk. Here's what I'm hoping to accomplish in a reference interaction, such as maybe empowering students to develop their skills or to develop their confidence in their own abilities as researchers. And here's a specific example of how I've done that. Here's a time where someone came to me with a question in psychology or a question about their English 101 paper, and here's what I helped them do. We should also note that you can search online for lists of common academic library interview questions and practice answering them. You're going to be much more confident, which is kind of our word of the day, going into the interview if you've practiced. And this will give the search committee confidence in you as a job candidate. Hiring someone new always entails a certain amount of risk because you really can't know as an institution how someone is going to perform on the job just from the interview alone. So when you can actually, give the search committee every reason to have faith in you because you've prepared for the interview, they're going to be more confident in making the decision to potentially hire you. And that's why we're emphasizing that aspect of confidence and preparation so much. So we list some examples there on the screen of popular interview questions. It's very likely you'll be asked about collaboration and teamwork, trends in academic libraries, particularly trends that relate to the particular position. Diversity, equity, inclusion is something that is commonly asked about today. And if you're interviewing, especially for a tenure track academic library position, you're probably going to be asked about your research interests. And there's going to be an expectation that you publish as part of that job. So a lot of times the committee is going to be interested in what interests you have there. And they don't have to be super specific, but you do want to have some concrete interests and show that you've thought about that. So tip 7, as we mentioned earlier, focuses on the presentation, which is something that is common to most academic library job interviews. It may be a presentation on a particular topic, or it could be a teaching demonstration if the job involves instruction. For most people, I think the presentation can be the most anxiety-inducing portion of the interview, but your anxiety is going to be alleviated to at least a certain extent if you spend time crafting and practicing your presentation to build up your confidence. It's important to remember that at the vast majority of institutions, I hope it's all institutions, but at most institutions, the people in the audience want you to succeed. They've asked you to interview for a reason, so the audience is on your side, and the presentation is your chance to really shine, and again, show them that they've made a good choice in selecting you for an interview. So in developing your presentation, don't assume that the audience has read your cover letter or resume carefully or knows much about you. Depending on the institution, a lot of people might be invited to the presentation who are not on the search committee. Those people will have read the interview or will have read the application materials that you've sent in. But the people who are not on the search committee or are not in the specific department, they may not know anything about your resume. They may have seen it in an email and passed it over or not even been sent it at all. So make sure that you're prepared to talk about yourself in a way that isn't dependent upon people having read those materials. Because the people who come to the presentation, even if they haven't seen all of that, they might be asked to provide feedback to the search committee on your presentation. And that is something that we do at U of L. We always ask those people to comment on how they felt about the candidate for the job. So you want to make a good impression on them. The presentation is also another opportunity to incorporate the research you did on the library and the institution, as Amber was showing with that example from our recent engineering librarian search. So you want to tailor your presentation carefully and to whatever extent possible, show how you can apply your skills and experience to their context. And again, be sure to practice, especially in front of people. It can be awkward to do that, which I can attest to because Amber and I have presented together many times and we always practice, including for this session. I hope it shows that we've practiced. And it can be awkward to do that, right? But practicing for people that you trust to actually give you good feedback will not only improve your presentation, but once again, build your confidence up for the day of the interview when you're going to be more nervous and you want that practice to kick in then. And then our final tip, tip number 8, is ties back into that last question that I asked Amber at the end of our mock interview. And that is, when given the opportunity, you always need to ask questions. And that is going to happen in almost every interview situation. So you always want to have questions prepared to ask. If you say you don't have any questions or that all of your questions have already been answered, it can make you seem disinterested or unengaged with the interview. Even if they have answered all of your questions, you need to have something that you want to ask there. And so again, that's what happened during the mock interview, where Amber passed up the chance to ask questions, which not only made her seem disinterested, but it also means, and I think this is an important point to remember, it means she's passing up an opportunity to make a more informed choice about whether this job or this department are right for her. She has an opportunity there, or you as an interview candidate have an opportunity there to learn more about the department. And so you don't want to pass up that opportunity for yourself either. We're supposed to be lifelong learners, right? As librarians, you hear that phrase all the time. And there's always more that we can learn by asking questions. So having a list of good questions shows that you're prepared, that you've thought through the position, and that you're eager to find out more about the institution and its work environment. This is where you really get a chance to interview your potential future employers. Though you do want to be sure to ask questions that pertain to the job. If you ask people overly personal questions, that can come across as being too familiar with people that you barely know, which could be perceived by some people, particularly judgy people, which sometimes there are judgy people in libraries, believe it or not. Those people might perceive that as unprofessional, or like, why did they ask me about that instead of something that actually has to do with me being a librarian at this institution? So then on the slide here, we have some example questions that we've heard candidates use over the years that we think are strong. So what do you love about working for this university or this library or this department? It really helps give you insight into what it's like to work at that location. And if people can't answer what they love about working there, that also gives you some information about that particular place. I saw information about a particular program, a summer research initiative or something like that on your website. I'd love to know a little bit more about that and how this position might be involved with that. And then lastly, what are some examples of ways that you have collaborated with each other on job responsibilities, projects, or research? That gives you insight into the level of collaboration that's happening. Do people get along with each other? Do they help each other and support their projects? So again, it's not just showing that you've prepared to ask questions, it also is a learning opportunity for you as a candidate. Okay, so that is the end of our official list of tips, and we hope that the information has been useful for you, and we're happy to spend the last amount of time that we have here answering your questions. So this is the first quiz question, which I think people have already passed in the chat, but do you all have any questions for us?
And I also put a link to the slides in the chat, so just make sure that's working. I think it's the correct link, but you will have access to these slides to view them after this.
Amber and Rob, can I ask a specific GLAM related question? Because I see, just because I opened up the slides, which Amber, thank you so much for sharing. Do you have tips or potential mistakes you often see over a virtual interview versus in person?
Yes, I have something I could answer that. I mean, there's probably several things that we could think about. One thing is to think very carefully about the location where you're going to be for that interview and whether or not your animals will end up appearing, or whether the location can just seem, for lack of a better word, unprofessional. You know, nobody is going to be upset if a cat or a dog appears on the screen briefly, but we have actually seen some instances where it kind of keeps happening, and that can be a real distraction. So remember that if you're interviewing virtually, it's still an interview, and you really want to probably treat it exactly like you would act and be present in the same way that you would be if you were physically there. Amber, can you think of anything else with that?
I was just going to mention the fact that I think online interviews for the presentation piece are clutch, because you don't have to be as practiced, because you can kind of write out everything you're going to say. I mean, that's what I did for this presentation today. I literally just like wrote up everything I was going to say, because you're not up there, you're not performing in the same way. You still want to bring that energy and make it not feel like you're just like, hello, I am Amber, I am here today to talk about this. But I think it gives you some more room when you're presenting online, which many of you probably will, because a lot of libraries have moved to staying virtual for interviews. Like, it gives you the opportunity to be really, really prepared and really, really good at that presentation because you're behind your screen and you can have your notes all written out that you can just be kind of going through as you go. So I didn't think of anything like that is bad about online interviews. I think Rob touched on it really well, just like making sure you're still doing it in a professional setting and in a professional way. But I think that it's a strength for some of these other things that we've talked about. And there is a question in the chat, what kinds of presentations could we expect to prepare for interviews? I can start. I think it's kind of all over the place depending on where you're interviewing. A lot of places for teaching focused positions will do a teaching demo of some kind. We don't really do that here anymore because we don't find it as valuable. It's awkward to pretend like everyone in front of you is a student, especially if you're in this online environment where everyone's cameras off and you're like, hello, I'm your teacher today. I did just pull up, we're hiring a tech services librarian right now, and I will just read you their presentation prompt if that can give you some ideas. So it's tell us about a cataloging or archival project that you have worked on, focus on the purpose of the project, the processes and tools used to accomplish it, your contributions, what worked well and what you learned that would help you in the tech services librarian position. You'll have 20 to 25 minutes for your presentation, followed by Q&A time from the audience. So it's pretty short, 20 to 25 minutes for a presentation is pretty typical what we do here. We usually schedule a 45-minute block. You talk for 20 to 25 to 30 minutes, then we have time for questions. But I say this is pretty typical, this kind of thing, where you're talking about something you've done, a project, an experience related to this work, and also applying it to the situation at hand, like what you've learned from it that you'll take here. How do you approach a similar thing in this particular position? Rob, did you have anything else to say about?
Yeah, I would say that the vast majority of the time that we're seeing presentation topics that are about specific projects that people worked on. Something else that we have added in our department, we have started having people do presentations basically saying, what is your vision for this position and how would you like go about doing this job? And you got to be a little bit careful about how you ask that, because obviously we're going to tell people who get the job something about what that vision is and how they're going to implement it. But we really want to get more of a holistic sense of how the person approaches the work that they do, and can they do preparation around looking at the institution and things like that. One other quick tip I wanted to mention, because it was a tip that was given to me when I was interviewing for the position that I initially got here at U of L. It was many years ago now, so it makes me sound old. I had to present on something related to Web 2.0, which nobody has even said the phrase Web 2.0 probably in 15 or 20 years. And I was really worried about it. And I contacted my mentor and I was like, I don't really know much about this. Why do they want me to do this presentation? And he told me, you know what? If they're asking for this on the job, they probably don't know that much about it either. They probably, and so he told me, you just need to know a little bit more about it than them. And that made me feel more confident that, hey, if I do a little bit of research on this, I'm going to be able to give a presentation that's helpful. So I think it always comes down to whatever the topic is, putting everything into it. Sometimes I have felt like there are job candidates who think that looking like they're trying to get the job is somehow a wrong move to make. It's like they want to seem like too cool for school or something. And they think that's what we want to see, people really trying and putting forth a good effort, because that's how they're going to be on the job.
And I think that kind of goes with this other question we have in the chat. Do you have any additional tips to sell yourself if you're lacking experience for a position? So beyond just what we've talked about with anything you can grasp at to draw experience from, to apply to what's being asked of you, you can of course talk about things that have happened in courses as well. So things you've learned in your library school courses. You don't have any teaching experience or anything applicable. Did you take a teaching class? Hopefully you can talk a little bit about that. But going off what Rob just said about enthusiasm, I think that's a way to sell yourself as well. If you can get your foot in the door with that good cover letter, selling yourself that you can do this position on the interview, bring enthusiasm. Don't act like you're too cool for school. Like, we're excited. We want to hire someone who's excited, who's going to bring energy, who's going to bring ideas and a fresh perspective. And that person doesn't always have to have the most experience in the world. They just have to be willing to learn. And again, bring that enthusiasm and ideas and energy that we're looking for. Do you have anything else for that one, Rob, about selling yourself if you're lacking experience?
No, I think I would just reiterate all the things that Amber, that you said, making sure that you're able to creatively draw on the experience that you have had, be honest about your limitations, but always show that you are enthusiastic to learn those things. I think that's important. I don't think that either I or Amber or other people at our library expect people to come to an entry-level job in particular, knowing how to do everything. But we want to know that they're going to be invested in learning it and that they're really interested in working together to develop their skills. So I think it really is, a big part of it is just how you're able to present yourself as someone who cares and wants to learn.
Definitely.
Are there any, it looks like we might be done with questions, but are there any last questions before we finish up? Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you
Reach
all.
out to us with any questions. You can find us on the internet.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.